All right. Good morning, everybody. Welcome back. It is week 18 of our study of the book of Genesis. Again, the emphasis, the focus of this particular study is just looking for the God of love from the beginning. Just a brief summary of where we've been so far and where we're going is to the end of the book. Last time we met, we covered Genesis 28. We see where Jacob was basically sent away by his father, but not just sent off, but actually was given a further blessing to go and to be productive and to do well. Basically, then they sent him to find a wife so that he wouldn't take one of these Canaanite women like Esau did. So he goes off with his father's blessing. At that point, Esau suddenly realizes, okay, Jacob's been sent away, like far away, so that he doesn't marry one of these women like Esau did. And he's been blessed to do that, so he thinks, okay, obviously this is a problem, so he goes and marries one of the daughters of Ishmael. So he gets it that his wives are a problem, so he gets another wife. Esau. So on the way, probably like within the first day or so, Jacob stops at a place that he ultimately ends up naming Bethel, or Bethel, and he has the dream of the ladder or the stairway going to heaven with angels going up and down, and there's the Lord up there at the top, and God reestablishes his covenant with of Abraham and Isaac, but this time with Jacob. And Jacob wakes up, it's like, this was the Lord's house and I didn't even know it. So the stone pillow, we had that conversation last time, he sets it up, pours oil over it, and says, this is nothing but the house of God. And so names it Beth El, house of God. Sets up a monument. We talked also about, it's important that we set up physical monuments to things that happen spiritually. When God meets us in a place, we should set something up as a reminder. When we pass by it, we see, this is a reminder, God met me here.
It's written in stone.
Yes, literally. That's the Ten Commandments. Same thing. Is there's a permanence to it. Something I didn't share last time, but when Cricket and I got married, the concept of setting up stones was a really big deal. Something that the pastor was teaching on quite a bit at the time. But monuments and memorials to God meeting us was very significant. Also, the story of David and Goliath was always a very special one to me because I'm getting way off topic, but but when David went out to meet Goliath, he didn't take one stone; he took 5. And further research into like Chronicles and I think maybe in Kings, you see that Goliath had at least 4 brothers or relatives, close relatives. You see other giants of Gath or of the Philistines, and you put all that together, you realize that David didn't go out there just to fight the giant in front of him. He went out there to take on the whole family, to win not just the battle in front of him, but all the battles. And so Cricket and I kind of combined the two concepts of the 5 smooth stones and setting up stones as pillars. And it's not this one, but the original wedding ring had engraved on it the date of our wedding, but also the words 5 smooth stones, so that on our hands we carried a memorial that we would memorialize the times that God met us, but also that we would approach life not just to take out the enemy in front of us, but with God take out the enemies that are coming beyond as well. It's just really important to have memorials somewhere. You need to have something that constantly tells you God is real, He's met me. Because the further we get away from an event, the easier it is for it to get diluted in our mind, to weaken. It's almost like you start going, did that really happen? And we need, when we know that we know that we know, we need to set something up that said, yeah, it really happened. And because when we come against the enemy to come, we need to remember the God who was there before and is with us now. So he sets up the stone, sets up the memorial. This is the house of God. And then he makes an oath. He makes a vow. And he says, if you will do all these things that you say you're going to do, if you'll be with me and you'll bring me back to my father's land, then you won't just be my father's God, you'll be my God. And again, it wasn't like one of those things like well, if you'll actually do this. It was almost like, since you're going to do this. But it's like, if this is the case, then this is the case. I mean, if this is who you're going to be, then I'm going to be, you'll be my God, but you'll be my God, and I'll be your servant, your person. He makes this covenant that God's given personal, and invests himself in it. Then we get to chapter 29, where he meets Rachel and Laban. We're going to go ahead and actually start at the beginning of that and recover that as we cover today's stuff. We want to again go over, our 3 questions, just as we go through and reread, to be looking for these things. Now, this doesn't always work perfectly with the way that we're chunking the stories up, because we're kind of in between this and in between that, and but it's always a good thing to have these questions in mind as you're reading through. It's like, 1, where's the God of love in the passage? Where's the evidence that he's that his love is evident? Why did he preserve this in his word? There's lots of stories that we don't have, lots of information that didn't make it into the Bible. So what is it about what is there that God thought was worth saving? Nothing is there by accident. It's not unintentional. It's very specific, and God is not wasteful. And then, how does this apply to my life? Because if you don't take this stuff and then apply it to your own life, it's just information. This is real information, real details about a very real God who is really active in our lives today. So how do we make him more real today in us? So again, we'll start in that's the wrong button. Okay. Chapter 29, start there at the beginning again. And once again, we're in the New American Standard. It's the 2020 edition. Then Jacob set out on his journey and went to the land of the people of the east. And he looked and saw a well in the field, and behold, 3 flocks of sheep were lying there beside it, because they watered the flocks from that well. Now the stone on the mouth of the well was large. When all the flocks were gathered there, they would roll the stone from the mouth of the well and water the sheep. Then they would put the stone back in its place on the mouth of the well. Jacob said to them, "My brothers, where are you from?" And they said, "We are from Haran." So he said to them, "Do you know Laban, the son of Nahor?" And they said, "We know him." And he said to them, "Is it well with him?" And they said, "It is well, and here is his daughter Rachel coming with the sheep." Then he said, "Look, it is still high day. It is not time for the livestock to be gathered. Water the sheep and go pasture them." But they said, "We cannot until all the flocks are gathered." And they roll the stone from the mouth of the well. Then we water the sheep. So you see a couple of things here. Like, one, he's greeting everybody. Sometimes I wish they would have formatted it the way we're used to reading dialogue. But he's like right in the middle of this, and he sees his cousin, I don't know, his Laban's daughter coming, and then he's suddenly like, "Why are you even here?" It's like, this isn't the time for watering sheep. Why don't you just water them and go on back out to the pasture? As a person of a household that is very much into taking care of sheep, I mean, wealthy with it, he knows what should be and shouldn't be done, and they're like, "Well, we can't do it till everybody gets here. When everybody gets here, then we'll roll the stone, then we'll water them, but we can't do it till then." It's kind of a lazy attitude from the folks that he's talking to. While he was still speaking with them, Rachel came with her father's sheep, for she was a shepherdess. When Jacob saw Rachel, the daughter of his mother's brother Laban, and the sheep of his mother's brother Laban, Jacob went up and rolled the stone from the mouth of the well and watered the flock of his mother's brother Laban. Again, it's like, okay, just because you're not going to do it. Also, this excuse, well, everybody needs to be gathered before we can move the stone, just gets shot. Like, because Jacob just did it by himself. It's like, no, we're not going to play like this. And she's not going to wait for you lazy bums. So he moved it and watered the sheep. Then Jacob kissed Rachel and raised a voice and wept. Jacob told Rachel that he was a relative of her father and that he was Rebekah's son. And she ran and told her father. So when Laban heard this news about Jacob, his sister's son, he ran to meet him and embraced him and kissed him and brought him to his house. Then he told Laban all these things, and Laban said to him, "You certainly are my bone and my flesh." And he stayed with him a month. It's a lot of emphasis on the relationship. Like, it was like his mother's brother, the daughter of his the brother of his mother, and like, okay, the fact that they're related, the fact that their family is emphasized over and over and over. It stresses the importance of family, but it shows us more emphasis on the culture of the Israelites to come. This family is incredibly important. You belong. If you're bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh, you belong. We're connected. This is a sense of community that is, I believe, really important to God. This is the idea that it's the love your neighbor as yourself idea. Is love your neighbor as though he was bone of your bone and flesh of your flesh. Like he shows up, he's a stranger, a neighbor, whatever. He comes up, you take care of him like he's family, like he's part of your own self. You certainly are my bone and my flesh, and he stayed with him a month. Then Laban said to Jacob, because you are my relative, should you therefore serve me for nothing? Tell me, what shall your wages be? And I think that in this time, Laban seeing some qualities of Jacob, but also there's this romance going on here. Like he sees, like, okay, I've got an idea how I can get some labor out of him. So Laban had 2 daughters. The name of the older was Leah. The name of the younger was Rachel. And Leah's eyes were weak, but Rachel was beautiful in figure and appearance. I did some research on this. And I can't give anything truly definitive, which is probably why there's so many different commentaries on this. But this weak-eyed Leah, it could mean that she just had bad eyes. But I went and checked, and it looks like the way that it describes weak eyes, that expression can also mean someone who is timid or shy. Someone who is withdrawn, rather than being someone who's bold or like very. It could mean nothing more than she was very withdrawn, reserved, shy.
Sparkle.
She had less vitality than Rachel. Rachel was very much go out, speak, show herself, and Leah didn't have the sparkle. She didn't have that vibrance. She was a more withdrawn person. There's no indication. I mean, as the story goes on, we don't see anything in here that says that she was ugly. It never says that she was ugly. It just says that Rachel was more beautiful and she was more vivacious. I just think Leah gets remembered because she's basically the mother of most of Israel. But she got a raw deal in the situation, and I just think that there are folks that see that she was weak of eye, like that there was something wrong with her, and I think that really the way it reads is that she was just in her sister's shadow more than anything else. That she was more withdrawn. Now Jacob loved Rachel. So he said, I will serve you 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So he makes this deal that Jacob would work for 7 years for the hand of Rachel. Something I want to kind of emphasize, because when we read through this story, it's really easy to see this in a different light than what it actually says. For example, we think of this. We read this and we think of young Rachel and we think of young Jacob, and you think of like people in their late teens, early 20s. Jacob did not start this journey, this direction, till he was at least 40, because Esau, who was his twin, married the Canaanite wives when he was in his 40s, probably right at 40, and so none of this could have happened till Jacob had at least turned 40. So the Jacob that's in this story is 40, maybe 41, and Rachel is probably much younger. This is one of the things that if I tell the middle school and high schoolers, they all get kind of weirded out, because that would be very unheard of in today's culture. But in their day, it was very common for a woman in her mid to late teens to marry someone who was in his 40s, or maybe even older, because they needed to have an established household. It wasn't like you could just do what marry whoever you wanted to, because they might not be able to take care of you, and then you and your family could die because there's not anything established. It's not like you can just like lose your job and go work something part-time to make ends meet. Is you literally grew ends meet. And so having somebody established was a big deal. So this working for 7 years for Laban was quite the bride price, especially with everything that Jacob had to offer as a servant in this. But this also means that Jacob is like 47 when he marries Rachel. And Rachel, however old she was, we were never told. At least I don't believe so. She was at least 7 years older. So that's just getting the scope of the time that was involved adds, I think, to the story. So I will serve you for 7 years for your younger daughter Rachel. Laban said, it is better that I give her to you than to give her to another man. Stay with me. So Jacob served 7 years for Rachel, and they seemed to him like only a few days because of his love for her. And I find that fascinating. 7 years is a long time. It can go by, as someone in his mid-40s, I know how fast 7 years can go by, but 7 years waiting for something, anything, is generally considered a long thing. I don't know if this is a cultural thing where they were used to things taking a lot longer, so they were more patient. But the idea of somebody waiting a year to get married is like, my wife and I were engaged for exactly a year. And when we told people that was the plan, they looked at us like, you're crazy. You're not gonna want to wait that long. We did. And here's the guy who was willing to work for 7 years to marry this girl. That's now granted, in this culture with that agreement, she was basically engaged to him. So they were everything. I mean, they're married, but they have not been permitted to come into one another, to join in. Say again?
It was locked in.
It was locked in. He just had to work off the agreement. And here's a great title: Laban's Treachery. And we're about to get into some stuff that this is one of the reasons. This is a story that I generally didn't teach, or I went through and just kind of gave the highlights to the kids, because this gets weird. Jacob said to Laban, give me my wife, for my time is completed, that I may have relations with her. That expression is actually go into her. It's basically, it just basically means I get to finally consummate this marriage. It means this, but I don't think they were quite that brash. And it just like, it's not the sort of thing you expect somebody to go up to a woman's daughter, father, and say, hey, yeah, no. But it's like, let me complete this arrangement that's been begun. So Laban gathered all the people of the place and held a feast. I would love to know what this feast entailed, because of what's about to follow. I'm trying to put the pieces together. How did this come about? About the best picture I've got for a Jewish wedding is from Fiddler on the Roof. And everybody's there, like the men are there, the women are there. It's like the groom and the bride are there. It's like so.
And they get really drunk.
Well, there is wine. We see that in like Jesus' first miracles. There's wine, sometimes really good wine. So Laban gathered all the people of the place and held a feast. Now in the evening he took his daughter Leah and brought her to him, and Jacob had relations with her. Laban also gave his female slave Zilpah to his daughter Leah as a slave. So it came about in the morning that, behold, it was Leah. And he said to Laban, what is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? So it seems to me that these feasts went on for a long time, late into the night. And this is the time that they don't have electric lights, and veils were commonly used, and there was alcohol. Honestly, this is a great story for teaching people moderation in drink. Seriously.
But after 7 years, like
So-
you said, so there's a freedom
Se-
here.
7 years, yeah, they're celebrating in moderation, especially if your father-in-law is Laban. What is this that you have done to me? Was it not for Rachel that I served with you? Why then have you deceived me? But Laban said, it is not our practice to marry off the younger before the firstborn. Could have said that in 7 years. Complete the week of this one, and we will give you the other also for the service which you shall serve with me for another 7 years. So, he's saying, like, can't marry the younger one first, so I gave you the older one because that's the practice. But it's no big deal. Finish out this week. Give the week marriage time for this one. And then I'll give you the other one and you can go ahead and work another 7 years for her.
What, 7 more years?
Well, 7 more years, and you'll have already married her. So it is like a week and then immediately marries the other and then like retroactively works off the additional 7 years. This is crooked in every way you can look at it. For another 7 years, Jacob did so and completed her week, and then he gave him his daughter Rachel as his wife. Here's an interesting thing. The New American Standard Bible is very good at translating the words the way they were written in the original, like transferring them over, which is why we get some of the therefores and the whatevers. But one of the things you'll see is the pronouns can get a little confusing. Because in the Hebrew, the pronouns can be a little bit confusing. You start seeing, well, let's say he, and they just expect you to know which he they're talking about. Where in English, we're supposed to write things and clear them up so that you know which he it is. They just kind of went with it. I suspect that there was inflections in the way it was written, but also remember this was an oral tradition, so they told it different. So he, whatever. Okay, good.
I'm
Jake?
surprised that there's not anything written about, how things were between Leah and Rachel afterwards.
There's a little bit.
Contention there.
There's some written there.
And Leah even went along with that.
See, and I thought about that. Like, going back, trying to flesh out this picture, this feast. Obviously, it's late. It's dark. But Rachel has been anticipating this for 7 years as well. What did Laban have to do to get her to shut up and be off to the side? And then Leah went along with this, but I can see Leah.
This is my only chance.
This might be it. And he's like, listen, you know what he's like? Like he's a good man. He'll take care of you. He won't dishonor you. We know that he's honorable. Like, let's get in here, and then like it'll all work out. Just trust me. I'll take care of this. Which is not unlike some of the stuff going on with Jacob and his mom and his blessings, where he kind of sidled in there and stepped into the place that wasn't his.
What I was thinking too is, would Jacob have known that this was the custom at the time?
You would think so.
Yes. But he asked, so it was like, well, we're going to sidestep that custom, or possibly.
Yeah, But even so, in the 7 years, there was an agreement.
Yeah, I know.
However, nobody figured it out until another agreement was basically made. Like, once he went into the tent with her, they were married. That's it.
And maybe he was thinking in that time, somebody would have come along for Leah.
You'd think.
Well,
It just would. I mean, honestly, you got two people who were in love and who were working toward this, and they're focused on each other. They're not thinking outside their little circle. Poor Leah. I mean, basically, it's your wedding night. You suddenly you're not like left in the dark and forgotten and whatever. And the next day, the guy that you've married is like, I'm disgusted. I've been cheated. How would you like to be the one who was that?
Well, I wonder if he kept having relations with her.
Absolutely.
He had 7 years.
Absolutely. I mean, they end up having lots of children.
I know, but was it after the next 7 years with Rachel?
That actually, as we go through, you'll start seeing, because there's a point where that 7 years is up that Laban is talking about new wages because Jacob's like, I need to build my own family, for provide for my own family. But you also start seeing that these children are born in that period of time. In fact, you start looking at the number of children and how they play out. Joseph was born somewhere around the end of the 7 years that he worked off for Rachel, I believe. But you look at I know that you look at the sons of Leah and so forth, and there's a certain amount of math that's involved, and it runs out. So they're definitely, but like culturally speaking, like the duties of the husband and the wife are very clear. There's and a lot of it has to do with growing the family and giving someone children and increasing the name of the family, and to not fulfill those duties was not just shameful. It's almost like a death sentence. So we look back at like Sarah and Rebecca and the agony they had of not having children. I mean, it's more than neglect. I mean, it's culturally shameful. And so he would not have neglected her. And that's one of the things I was saying is like, like Laban would tell Leah, go in, like once the deed's done, he's an honorable man. You're not going to be forgotten. But that may have seemed like a great idea the night of, but...
And giving children in those days was about the only thing that women were recognized for.
Well, I mean, it was their special honor. That's only something that they could do. They also ran households. I mean, they were very skilled in the kind of things of like household management and so forth. But yes, there's a reason you see so much agony in the women who were barren. I mean, there's a natural, biological desire for children, generally, but culturally speaking, there was shame in not being able to produce children. In fact, we're going to see more of that in this story. So Jacob did so and completed her week, and he gave him Laban gave him, Jacob, his, Laban's daughter, Rachel, as his, Jacob's wife. Laban also gave his female slave Bilhah to his daughter Rachel as her slave. So Jacob had relations with Rachel also, and indeed he loved Rachel more than Leah, and he served with Laban for another 7 years. Now the Lord saw that Leah was unloved, and he opened her womb, but Rachel was unable to have children. Now this does not mean that God was punishing Rachel. However, he was actively supporting Leah, which I think is huge, because Leah, none of this is her fault. That, as far as we can tell, I mean, she's trying to do everything as right as she can. She's obeying her father. She's trying to be there for her husband, who never wanted her. Rachel has other issues, and we'll get into those in a bit of time. Leah conceived and gave birth to a son and named him Reuben, for she said, because the Lord has seen my affliction, surely now my husband will love me. Then she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, because the Lord has heard that I am unloved, he has therefore given me this son also. So she named him Simeon. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, now this time my husband will become attached to me, because I have borne him 3 sons. 3 sons, all named the way they were named because she was unloved. So we're talking about pretty close to 3 years' time here. And still she's naming the son because maybe now he'll appreciate me. Maybe now he'll be attached to me. Therefore he was named Levi. And she conceived again and gave birth to a son and said, this time I will praise the Lord. Which is fascinating. So in basically 4 years, it's like maybe he'll love me. Maybe now he'll love me. Maybe now he'll be at least attached to me. And on the 4th one, I'll just praise the Lord. Which is astounding, honestly. Therefore, accepted her lot, or at least decided, this is getting me nowhere. I've got 4 sons, and that's something, and I need to be giving glory where it belongs. Therefore, she named him Judah. Interesting thing about the name Judah is the name Judas comes from the name Judah, and it basically, this is Yehuda, but it basically means to praise the Lord, and I believe it means to praise the Lord with your hands. It's not just giving him praise, but it's praise. Then she stopped having children. Now when Rachel saw that she had not borne Jacob any children, she became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I am going to die." It sounds dramatic, but we see this phrase frequently. We see this idea frequently that she's not only not having children, but she's the one that's loved, but her sister, who should never been in this situation at all, is having lots of children, and Rachel's having none. And so, this is with Sarah, there was some thought that maybe the problem wasn't her, it could have been Abraham, till Hagar came along, and they immediately had a child. And so suddenly there's this shame, it's clearly me. For Rachel, it's clearly Rachel's the problem. So this shame is huge for her. Not only that, but it's her sister who's doing better than her. Her sister, who up until this point was always everyone's like, well, there's Leah, who's got weak eyes, but here's Rachel. Only now, here's Rachel, and Leah's got all the kids. So for Rachel, this is something. We're also going to find as we go along that Rachel is a bit of a spitfire. She does things throughout that draw attention to her, but she's a little impulsive occasionally. She became jealous of her sister, and she said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I'm going to die." Then Jacob's anger burned against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld the fruit of from you the fruit of the womb?" Then she said, "Here is my female slave Bilhah." Yes. The idea was not original with Hagar, but you would think that he'd know his family history.
Right.
But it doesn't matter what history you know when your wife is right there and she...
And then Rachel's going to have 2 women to contend with that have children instead of just one against her no children.
But in this case, she knows that the problem is her. And so as far as she can see, this is the only way she can do it. Now the slave, being a slave, the handmaiden, any children that the slave woman has will be adopted by her and be hers by right. Now the fact that she can't have a child of her own body is shameful, but she's willing to give up of her husband and she's making a way for it to happen anyway, for him to have children anyway. This is considered a sacrifice, and it's a way to kind of alleviate that shame. It's like, I can't do it myself, but I'm willing to give of this to make this happen. And these children will be as my children, my gift to my husband. Complicated. Very complicated.
Digging a deeper hole, right?
It gets more complicated. But one thing that I will point out is at the covenant that God made with Abraham was a covenant with Abraham and his descendant through Sarah. And God had made a promise that there was going to be, he and Sarah were going to have a son. So when they brought Hagar in, this was trying to sidestep God. God has not done this with Jacob. He has not said it's the descendants through you and this one person. He said it's going to be your descendants. So there's nowhere in this that they're trying to sidestep God necessarily. So we're not seeing quite the same results, because you think, well, the Hagar thing, they had to send away the child. God has a different plan and different allowances in that plan. Also point out that in this culture, in this day, none of this was illegal. None of this was considered immoral. This was not. It wasn't necessarily advisable or what the way God intended, but it wasn't like they were just living in this like weird sin situation. This was, well, not the norm. This situation is just strange, but it was acceptable and it was legal. It wasn't even immoral. Then she said, "Here's my female slave Bilhah. Have relations with her that she may give birth on my knees," or like basically on my behalf. It also implies that the child that she gives birth to will sit on my knees as though it is my son. It's relating to adoption culture. "So that by her I too may obtain a child. So she gave him her slave Bilhah as a wife, and Jacob had relations with her. Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, 'God has vindicated me, and has indeed heard my voice, and has given me a son.' Therefore she named him Dan. And Rachel's slave Bilhah conceived again, and bore Jacob a second son. So Rachel said, 'With mighty wrestling I have wrestled with my sister, and I have indeed prevailed.' And she named him Naphtali. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children, you know, this family, oh my goodness. One of the laws of Moses does not specifically say don't marry more than one woman, but it does specifically say do not marry a woman and her sister. Specifically, don't marry her woman's sister to spite her. But there is definite indication this is a bad idea. Don't do this.
Maybe that's
There's a reason that that's in there. When Leah saw that she had stopped having children because 4 was not enough, she took her slave Zilpah and gave her to Jacob as a wife. And Leah is not so timid anymore. Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "How fortunate." So she named him Gad. And I believe Gad, let me check this one real quick. Gad means fortune. And Leah's slave Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. Then Leah said, "Happy am I, for women will call me happy." So she named him Asher. Just got to check. Yep. She named him Happy. Some of these kids are starting to sound like the 12 dwarfs. We got Happy, we got Lucky, we got... sorry. Now in the days of the wheat harvest, Reuben went and found mandrake fruits in the field. So I don't know how old Reuben is, but he's old enough to be out in the field like looking for stuff at this point. But considering they didn't wait nearly as long, he was 6, 7 years old, thereabouts. Who knows? But he's old enough to go around and do that. And this story gets stranger and stranger. Went and found mandrake fruits in the field, and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, "Please give me some of your son's mandrakes." But she said to her, Leah said to Rachel, Is it a small matter for you to take my husband?"
wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. There's a couple of different points. One of, like, technically she was first, but I don't know that this necessarily means... It's hard to see. It's hard to tell exactly what this is referring to. But the context of the story kind of makes you wonder. So much makes you wonder. "And would you take my son's mandrakes also?" And I would point out the mandrakes were considered a kind of aphrodisiac, possibly a fertility-enhancing root herb, whatever you want to call it. So Rachel said, "Therefore, he may sleep with you tonight in return for your son's mandrakes," which I find incredibly confusing. You want to get the herb to make it more likely that you'll get pregnant. So in return for that, you'll give your husband up for...
A 9.
And I start to wonder if these people really know how all this works. Clearly they do, but... And then... Y'all, what must it have been like to be Jacob?
I was thinking, Betty.
Because, well, I don't know. This is what he's coming home from work to. When Jacob came in from the field in the evening, Leah went out to meet him and said, "You must have relations with me, for I have indeed hired you with my son's mandrakes."
Wow.
I mean, this is a guy coming in from the field. It's been a long day. I don't have any idea what he's got. I mean, he might just be thinking, what's for supper? And then one of his wives comes up and says that to him. All right.
But now this is the man who got the birthright based on a meal.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
turned about a lot of his little antics.
there is a lot of irony in all this. A lot of poetic. Is justice the right word? There's a lot of poetry in here.
Poetry.
This is what we call. It's a comedy. A comedy of errors is what it feels like. This is an interesting story all by itself, but trying to flesh out the details here and like figure out what was this actually like, and you start to realize it's amazing that Hollywood has not run away with this story,
Yes,
because
they did.
wow. So he slept with her that night. God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore a 5th son. Talk about okay, another son. Then Leah said, God has given me my reward because I gave my slave to my husband. It's like, so now because I was generous and gave for her for more sons for my husband, God has rewarded that generosity and given me another son. So she named him Issachar, and Leah conceived again and bore a 6th son to Jacob. Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good gift. Finally, my husband will acknowledge me as his wife, because I have borne him 6 sons. So she named him Zebulun. Afterwards, she gave birth to a daughter and named her Dinah. I really feel like Dinah got low billing on all this. I mean, she's like the 7th child.
Going to, yeah.
Yeah. What was it like to be Dinah in that household? Just like, what kind of, who's your role model? Anyway. Then God remembered Rachel. And I love the word remembered. I think it's one of the words that's gotten watered down when we're translating it in English. I don't think or at least translating it into modern English, we hear remembered and we think of like not forgetting or bring to mind. And it's not like Rachel was ever out of God's mind, but he brought her forward into thought, and he brought her into remembrance. It's almost like he's reminding her, you're not forgotten. And God listened to her and opened her womb. So she conceived and gave birth to a son and she said, God has taken away my disgrace. And she named him Joseph, saying, may the Lord give me another son.
Maybe a better word would have been acknowledged. Then God acknowledged. Because it said, and he listened to her.
Yes. God remembered Rachel, and God listened to her and opened her womb.
That means she was speaking to him.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, she's probably been crying out this whole time, like, God, help. And when God wouldn't answer, she blamed Jacob. And Jacob didn't care for that, and so she gave... Anyway. Interesting thing here is, like, he's taken my away my disgrace, and she said... She named him Joseph, saying, may the Lord give me another son. And the word Joseph basically sounds like he add to me. And we are probably going to stop there for the day because we're about out of time. It's really kind of amazing that we got through that many children and wives, and yikes. So, wow.
So what's the lesson in this?
That's a good question. Where is the God of love? Like, you reap what you sow. And sometimes if you happen to be blessed by God, that means you're going to get 30, 60, and 100-fold of what you sowed. That this family has got a mess of culture and inclinations that every one of them has had. Like, it's a wow. But looking for the God of love in this is the active remembrance that Leah may have been overlooked by her husband, but not by God, and that Rachel, who none of this was really her fault either, but she was younger, she had more time. God is not interested in our schedule. I mean, he's interested in us, he cares about us, but he has a plan and he has a time frame that is inherently patient We need to remember that just because things aren't happening now doesn't mean we're forgotten. That we are remembered. It's just we're going to be remembered in His time. And when we're remembered by a good God who is a giving and right God. Also looking at the incredible patience of God with people doing things their way. Because this whole family gets blessed, and the whole world gets blessed through this family. Interesting, yeah.
Would the servants have been also Israelites, do you think?
Complicated, because Israelite is someone who is descended from Israel, who is Jacob. So they're legal wives, they're concubines in this case. So they're not, so it's like a second class wife, but they still have the wifely rights as far as that's concerned.
Could have converted,
But
but there was nothing to convert to.
yeah, there was the following and they did follow Jacob, and they followed his leading because he's the head of the household, and that's what they did. But also,
Well, they have to have the lineage.
they were nearly.
Yeah, they do.
Here's the thing: is they would be included in the family, because in the marriage one they're brought in legally, but also because they were the maidservants of Leah and Rachel. You never hear about when they say, like, may you be like as prosperous as Leah and Rachel. You never hear about the maidservants. They were included in with the Leah and Rachel, so they're part of it. They have a lower standing, but they're clearly a part. They're named. They're named in the Bible, but they're definitely there. Because their children are of the tribes of Israel. Their children are the patriarchs of each of the tribes. So, I do need to wrap up. I do want to point out one other thing. I want to go back to Leah. Actually, I'm just going to reference it. She had the first 3 sons, and they were all about being noticed by her husband and accepted by her husband and loved by her husband. The one that she finally said it seems like she's finally said, "Now I will give praise to the Lord," is Judah, and Judah is the line from which Christ comes. The one where she stopped putting all of her emphasis on the earthly husband and gave glory to God. That one becomes the patriarch of the line from which Christ comes, and that is
Power of worship.
it's amazing.
Good point.
So, as far as why did God preserve this, I think it's incredibly useful for us to know that God is good throughout our foolishness, and that as crazy and mixed up and chaotic as our lives can be, He's still Himself, and He does things in His time, and He works them towards His plan. And His plan, I know I shared this a while back, His will be done, but He's really big. He can get there any way He wants to, and He can improvise tremendously to get where He's going, provided we include Him. And He's still going to get there. The question is whether or not we will. But on that note, do not marry 4 women, but praise the Lord and look for His goodness. And until next time, I'll see you.